We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Ashbek. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. I'd like us to observe a moment of silence so that we can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that the meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Colleagues, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. There are no minutes, and so there are no deputations. We have one. I assume there are no questions that have been submitted. Angie? No? Okay. So we'll move right to the first report that we're dealing with is the draft capital budget. I know that Lane has a presentation to make, which I think is up on the screen right now. And in discussions with Lane, what he's asked is that he'll go through each section. And if you have any questions on that particular section, we'll take them at that time. If there's a motion to alter the recommendation, we'll entertain that motion at that time. If not, we'll just keep going and then we'll pass it on to this motion at the end. That's okay with everybody? Okay. Gary, I'm assuming you can hear me. You can, I'm being told.
Yes, I can.
There we go. So it's over to you, Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to council for setting aside some time for this special meeting today. As council can see, I'm a little bit scruffier than normal, just a little bit. Joined the Movember fundraising efforts in support of men's health for this year. So thanks to everybody that supported me so far, and sorry to council for having to look at this for a little while. The presentation will follow along in the same order as the large summary sheet. And as the mayor outlined, just questions as they arise. And also be advised that the management team is following along on Zoom. So typically Angie or I, who's been very much involved in the presentation and the document, could probably answer questions, but if it needs to get a little bit more detailed, then our department heads are available to answer those questions. So just a reminder of our council approved timeline. We're pretty early in the budget cycle for 2022. Today's capital and studies presentation. We will be receiving the new assessment roll at some point in December, and I'll begin a process there to start calculating true growth over this last year. Our next presentation with council is on December the 9th, and we'll go through our impacts presentation at that point. Things like insurance impacts, healthcare benefits, cost of living increases, CPI, different things like that. So that'll be coming up on December the 9th. Managers will have budget worksheets and everything over to me and Janice before the break, and then we'll finalize the budget package to go to council, and that will go out on January the 21st. So the package that council has, there's a summary worksheet, today's presentation, the detail, and then as noted, if there's any questions, department managers are available. So just before we get to 2022, just a bit of a recap on where we are with the capital program for 2021. As council has requested in previous years, we have noted on our summary sheet wherever there are continuations or carryover projects, just so that council will be aware. Definitely in 2021, we were affected once again by the ongoing effects of COVID-19. And with respect to capital in a number of areas, delays really with respect to design consultation and any changes, scope changes, sometimes getting folks out to the site, and specifically contractor availability. It's been a challenge. Rick and his guys that I mentioned before did a great job in terms of getting the roads ready for our resurfacing contractors. And we were fortunate to actually get through the majority of our resurfacing program this year and our capital program for this year. I do know that there are other member municipalities of the county that were not able to get any work done this year. And so I think I just wanted to note that that's really due to really, I think Rick Shuey and the guys getting stuff ready and available there, because contractor availability really was a challenge this year. We do have a number of multi-year and phased projects, primarily in the roads area, but a little bit in facilities as well. And of course, we will review this again in December and then again at our actual full budget meeting, because there could be some projects that will have to carry over a little bit of a residual, and I'll make sure the council is aware of that at the time. So we'll jump into our department by department review. General government is the first area. We've got a number of capital investments there. The one that I wanted to, well, there are some typical replacements. I guess you would see typically every year in terms of computers, software, things like that. Our goal obviously is to maximize and utilize our technology that we have. But what I wanted to highlight is the third application under the modernization funding we've put in for the province. This actually is referred to on the budget worksheet as communication and collaboration, and it takes us into the Microsoft 365 environment and some of the benefits that that could do for us there with respect to communications, how we interact in the office, and coupled with that would be the replacement of our phone system. That application actually, with all of that work and what it can do for us, it a lot of efficiency savings in terms of staff time, things like that. The application itself is only $75,000. So it's if we are successful with that application, the impact of that $75,000 will be well, it will definitely allow us to maximize our time here in the office. It takes us though into a bit of a new environment with technology. The old way would have been to buy hardware, buy software, install it, keep up to date with the annual updates, and then at a period of time, maybe 5 or 10 years later, do that all over again. When we get into cloud-based Microsoft 365, all of a sudden we move away from that into a more of an annual subscription-based program, and all of those things are out on the cloud and available on the cloud, but it frees up a little bit more funding in terms of hardware and software that we don't need to buy. But of course, that it moves it from the capital realm over into the ongoing operating costs. So a bit of a shift there. So not a lot of change in that area other than this grant-based program. We should know that by the time we approve our budget. And specifically with respect to Microsoft 365, if we aren't successful in the grant, although I think the grant application was a good one, if we aren't successful, then staff will bring back an alternative method of implementing that, because we, as outlined in the detailed sheet, we really do need to move on that. We're getting to a point where some of the Microsoft products are not going to be supported any longer. And we always try to stay ahead of that curve. So that's all I have to comment on general government.
Any questions, comments?
Okay, thank you. So moving on into Department 6, this is our facilities area. The Municipal Office, we've been successful under the COVID grant program there to make some of our initial changes at the front to improve entranceways for our customers, ensure that there's a separation there when they come into the building and leave. We have some additional changes that we think we can implement there with respect to the front counter, maybe get a little bit more lobby space, things like that. And we still have some work left this year to do with respect to those entranceways. But in the actual budget for 2022, we've got 2 areas in the Municipal Office. One is the ongoing building envelope improvements. And I think how Mike referred to it is basically the low-hanging fruit there in terms of some of the changes we can make with respect to improving insulation, caulking, some window changes, things like that. So that would be in the budget for this year. But with respect to COVID-19 and the renovations there and the involvement of the digitization project, which council is aware is underway right now, we'd be able to free up some more office space, workspace through that project. So the photo that's on there is really our rolling files where the tax rolls are. Takes up, it is very compact, and then it takes up a lot less space than it used to, say 10 years ago. But once we get it all digitized, the majority of those files can go, and that then opens up workspace for some type of flexible office space. So not necessarily offices, but office spaces. And we get into the realm then of temporary workspaces, hot desks, things like that. So people that need to be in the office can be in the office temporarily, but then at their home as well. So that's
Just a second. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the budget working paper, it says the estimated total project cost is 100,000 with the cost in the current year's budget of 20,000. So has some of that money already been sort of previously allocated?
I'll just
Or am I looking at the wrong page? It's the Municipal Office improvements component 2.
yeah. So I'm just sorry. I thought I had that page open. Just one sec. Yeah. So how that works? Yeah. The very first column is our overall project cost. So that if it's a multi-year project, yeah. And so we would have spent this year about $80,000, and that would have been funded by the grant. Thank you for that question.
Donna?
Yes, through you to Lane. This isn't a question, this is a compliment. I really like the idea of just off the lobby, having a meeting space for customers. Because I've walked in there before and people are talking about private things and you can hear the conversation. So it's a really good idea.
Right. Yeah, there's quite a bit of discussion on that in terms of the admin senior team, and we felt the same way. Okay, I'll carry on some more municipal facilities. In the fire hall, primary investments there for capital this year would be in Fire Hall 2, and in the actual fire hall bays there, we've got a couple of HVAC units that have been there since really they went in the late 90s. And so Jesse and Mike have reviewed those and they're up for replacement this year. Not a significant investment there, but at the same time will have a big impact on Hall 2. Over into the public works facilities, fairly significant investments in our sand domes. Some council members may recall, it seems to me it was just yesterday, but I think it's been almost 20 years that we did reshingle both of the domes. So as you can see from the photos there, we definitely are in need of reshingling again. Rick has reached out to the consultant, and a bit of a specialized consultant in this area that does domes. So what's outlined in the project budget for this year is actually a structural review of both of the domes to ensure that they're in good shape. We do know that there's some areas of plywood that will need to be replaced. And then once that's done, a reshingling of that. So while the engineer will likely be sole sourced because he is a specialized engineer for this, we will put that out into an RFP for reshingling this year. He's provided the estimate at 119. I'm prepared based on how the budget is laid out at 119, and we're hopeful that that's what the cost will come in at overall.
Yes, through you to Lane. So Lane, are these both the same sand dome, the both pictures, or is the picture that's in better shape how it should look?
Yeah, no, they're actually both the same. Sorry, they're both different photos. So they're two different domes. One is in worse shape than the other. Yeah, so the one is just a little bit more, it's up on the top end, whereas the one to the right is actually the one that's in worse shape this year. But
So you're not going to do anything to the one that's in a little better shape this year?
we would do them both because we're at a point where we think by putting it out for an RFP together, we'll get a better price.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. Yes.
How old are these shingles, or when was the last time that they were done?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I thought it was just being done, but these are they're like a 25-year life shingle, but it's probably been 15 plus years. So it's very similar to what you're seeing in your house as well, right? So these shingles that are 20, 25 years are not lasting that long.
Thank you.
Okay, and then just a bit of a general catch-all for all of our municipal facilities. At the Innismore complex, the system there is 15 plus years, almost 20 years, I guess. And there's definitely been new technology that's come along. This is the water system that provides water to the entire rec complex over in Innismore. So this year, Mike's proposing a review, so we'd have an engineer actually come in, take a look not only at that system, but some of our other rural systems and the types of UV systems that we have, and try to ensure that we have comparability between our parts, so that if we need a pump someplace, we know that it's going to be interchangeable at the different locations. So there's that work that's there. We always have a placeholder amount in related to land, so if we need an appraisal or a survey or different things like that. And then at the Lakefield Police Services Building and the Chamber of Commerce, once the police office is relocated down to the Scout Building, then we would kickstart that RFP for design there to provide accessibility to the second floor. And that project has already been put out. BBA is our consultant that's involved, but we put it on pause last year, just waiting for the police office to be relocated and to ensure that we would have the footprint on the main floor to allow for accessibility to the second floor.
Donna?
Yes, through you to Lane. So I assume by the way you're talking that the police are definitely going to move to the Scout Building area. There's no question about that.
That's correct. And Scott, who is still on as our project manager on that, has been in a discussion with them all the way along the way. So they've had input into the design, definitely communications, phone lines, things like that they've been involved in. And yeah, we're just trying to get that project finished up. I know Scott's been dealing with the contractor. They're trying to get the final bit of sub-trades on site. And as soon as that's done, then the police will be moving down to that location.
Okay, and then just one more question. Have you had any inquiries about the use of that space, both upstairs and down, or you're just anticipating that when it's ready, somebody will come in and rent it or lease it or whatever?
Yeah, so we, staff has had initial discussions with the Chamber of Commerce about the possibility of additional space on the main floor. For any discussions on the second floor, definitely accessibility is an issue. So the thought there is, as soon as that is accessible, then there may be some other options that open up. And we do have on the books basically an application, and we'll continue to look at other applications for a business incubator for that space. And we're hoping then that there would be discussions with the Chamber of Commerce, our corporate services team, to see if we can somehow put together a package so that we could have a business incubator and maybe some support through our community development folks and the Chamber of Commerce as well.
Okay, thank you.
Wayne, on that, the money that you're asking for the engineering stuff, was that not part of last year's budget? Is this money that you didn't, that lapsed and now you're?
That's correct. Yeah. So the overall project was around $85,000. We've really only spent about $8,000 to date.
Right.
Yeah, so that was kind of paused last year, and now we kickstart that again.
Okay, good. Thank you. Cool.
Okay, moving over to Department 7. This is the community development area. Another project that's been before council a couple of times, but it's in a different way. Peak had put in red funding applications over the last couple of years, so at least maybe 2 years ago. Not sure if they applied last year, and haven't been successful. But that was with respect to the community kiosk signage program, and we had 3 primary kiosks in our township in the general built-up areas. The application that we're looking at here would actually be the township taking the lead and moving away from a PCAD application and moving to a different funding program as well. And this is a federal funding program. So we would look at not only the 3 primary kiosks, but also 3 smaller kiosks in our other built-up areas as well. And it's referred to as a Main Street. I just have it referred to as a Main Street grant project. It isn't actually the Main Street grant under the province. It's under the feds. And Angela, I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted to add on that. It's just it's a bit of a different approach that the feds have put together, and I think Leisha was integral in finding out about that.
Yeah, it's called the My Main Street Activator Fund, and it's a program really intended to kickstart projects in downtown areas. So we would apply for the December 1st intake, And at this point, it looks like they would provide 100% funding. So we're hopeful that we could actually be successful with that grant. We're looking at the kiosks for this grant program, as well as Lane will, when we get to the roads department, we're looking at some improvements in the downtown with the intersection interlock brick as another project for that grant. Yeah.
Yes, Donna?
Yes, through you to Angie, I guess. So if we weren't successful with that grant, would we still go ahead and put the 57,862 into the budget?
Yeah, I think we would come back to council with another funding program for you to consider. We'd look for another grant opportunity if we weren't successful. Otherwise, we'd have to look at reserves, but definitely we would bring that back to council for your decision.
Thank you.
Okay, over to the fire department next. Carrying on with their fire equipment replacement schedule for this year. There's actually no new apparatus purchases planned for this year, so a little bit smaller purchase year for the fire department, although it's still over $100,000 of equipment, mostly in the area of personal protective equipment for the firefighters, bunker gear, hose and nozzle replacement, small equipment replacement, things like that. And setting aside money for future years purchases when some of those pumpers and tankers come online as well.
Yes, Donna?
Sorry for all these questions. I'm the one that wants to buy the karaoke machine. So I assume this bunker gear is for current firefighters whose bunker gear is outdated.
Well, because of the expense of bunker gear, we put in place a program a few years ago to review the bunker gear every year and try to replace anywhere from 10 to 12 sets on an annual basis. And so they take a look at the ones which have the most wear, things like that. And then the other is that as we have an ongoing volunteer recruitment program, we need to ensure that we have the proper fit for all of our staff that we have in the fire department. So they take a look at that. And so as part of those 12 sets of replacements, then if all of a sudden we were to have maybe some different size firefighters that would come in, we'd replace those with the proper sizes at that point in time.
Okay, so we might have to buy more sets if we have different firefighters applying.
If we couldn't reuse, and they've really come a long way in terms of that PPE, in terms of exterior gear versus interior gear and how that's put together. But definitely the program and how we have it laid out over a 10-year replacement cycle is if one year we only needed 10 sets, we'd get 10. The next year we might need 14 sets, that type of thing. So it would work out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under the radio equipment, just over $17,000. I know in the past, Gord has talked about the challenges with dead zones or that they sometimes can't communicate because of, I guess, poor connectivity or whatever, and also something to do with their tablets. Does that sort of encompass this 17,000 for the radio equipment?
I think as a general comment, I think this is just typical replacement. I believe that the issue at the north end of Smith has been taken care of at this point in time. I'm not sure if you know any more about that.
Yeah, that definitely has been a challenge. And I know that Gord's been working on the tower up there. I'm not sure if it's been addressed yet, but we can follow up and find out about that.
Yeah.
And Lane, just from looking at this, we don't need to look at money for a new pumper until 2025, 2026. Right?
That's correct. Yeah. Okay, only one area or one expenditure in the police area, and this has been before council before. This is the speed awareness board, and so what's being proposed here is that would just be included in the budget program, and it would be funded from reserve.
Okay.
Okay. On to Department 14, building equipment. So in line with our climate change action plan and really the completion of a successful pilot for our PHEV vehicle, it's being recommended that we would go with a full EV this year in terms of the replacement. We go out to a RFP or tender. The additional caveat to that is that with the more active and fulsome bylaw enforcement, that Rob's proposing to actually retain the half ton for the typical amount of years that we would keep a half ton for, which would be 10, and that would be used primarily by the bylaw enforcement officer. Right now, they're kind of sharing up the hybrid, and there are challenges at times for sure to get that accomplished. So kind of two things at play here. One is going to full EV for the building department unit 2, and the other is retaining the existing building department 2 for bylaw enforcement. It's seen as the next step in our climate change action plan and outlined in that. So Rob's very supportive of moving ahead with an SUV of some form.
So just so that I understand, so you're saying that the size of our fleet increases by 1?
That's correct. And this, well, I guess it does. Our fleet overall increases by 1. The building department fleet would still stay at 2, but we would add a new unit now to bylaw enforcement, which we did not have before.
Okay, thank you. Sherry?
Thank you, through you. Yesterday at the county, we were given a proposal where we could possibly go to fleet leases. And I don't know if the county had reached out to the townships to give you information on that. And I wondered, first of all, have you heard about that? And would it be something we might contemplate? Because one of the examples that were given that are going in that direction is Clearwater, which is one of our comparables.
Yeah, so we definitely, I was involved in an initial discussion. I think Rick and Janice have been involved in discussions with the county and the different providers that do provide that lease. I don't think Rob was directly involved in that. For this, we were looking at an outright purchase of the EV, but if that is something that we can definitely do a little bit more investigation in terms of the leasing option there. This proposal looks at basically a purchase and then a 10-year useful life. I don't know if Rick really has come to a conclusion yet about the benefits of the leasing program for us, and taking a look at the fleet overall, whether that makes sense or not. But we are aware of that program for sure.
Okay, thank you. And actually, there is an optimal time. They figure when it's good to go in that direction. I don't know if we're there at all, but just was curious as to whether you had actually been involved in some of the conversations.
We definitely have been involved, but it is, that's a good point. We should maybe get back to that just to review and see if it could maybe help in even other areas of the fleet somehow.
Donna?
Yes, through you, Tulane. Our first vehicle was a Mitsubishi, I believe, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
And will we be getting the same kind this time, another Mitsubishi?
The unit that tends to be coming to the top right now is actually a Hyundai Kuna, and it's a full EV, and it has a longer range. That tends to be the vehicle that's spoken about at this point in time, but I'm not sure if Rob is available on the line to speak to that a little bit, but I do know that tends to be the one that rises to the top in terms of what we'd be looking at.
And
I am online. I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, so our goal, of course, would be to get a vehicle that not only has the right range, but also has the right characteristics for the environment that we find ourselves in. And in our context, of course, we're on private roads quite a bit in the winter, and so we need all-wheel drive. So that's where I think we find that there's a limited selection of full EV vehicles today that meet that. The Kona seems to be the one. It's the right size. It is full all-wheel drive. If we were to find others, of course, we would consider them. But we're aware of that. Some other municipalities, building departments have gone with the Kona for precisely the reasons that we find them attractive as well. But again, we're not tied to it. It's just we wanted, of course, to make sure that there was an EV vehicle available to us that would meet our needs. And until recently, that wasn't the case. So, we ended up with the Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid because that was the only offering we had that got close to full EV, but offered the all-wheel drive option. So I'm sure that, as time goes on, perhaps next year, there'll be more options, maybe even domestic options that we could look at that would offer the full EV and all-wheel drive.
Thank you, Rob. Jerry?
Thank you. Through you to Lane, I guess, and Rob. In the past, I believe we've taken the building department vehicles, passed them on down the line to the roads. What's the plan with these once they hit their kilometers or their average life that we tend to keep them?
Yeah, so as outlined in the replacement schedule at this point, yeah, we had taken the vehicle and instead of using it for 10 years, we'd only used it for maybe 4 to 6 years and then provided it to Parks. And then Parks used it for the remainder of the useful life. What's being outlined in this program is essentially we would use it now for the full 10 years and then replace that vehicle. So there would be no swapping of vehicles between the departments. And the Parks and Rec department has a replacement schedule set up now that takes care of their own needs.
Thank you.
Okay, Donna?
Yes, through you to Lane. So is the purchase price of this new vehicle 45,000? Is it comparable to what we ended up paying for the Mitsubishi? Because I know we did the 1-year lease and then we did the buyout. And I can't remember the dollar figure. So is the price comparable?
Yeah, no, once again, Rob may be able to comment on that. I think that one of the benefits to us the last time when we bought was we did lease under that 1-year pilot first, and it was funded through FCM. Thank you. Yeah. I do believe this is, as a purchase price, is comparable to what we ended up paying for our buyout at the end.
That's correct. Yeah, they're quite similar in cost. Yeah.
And that's probably, I know a half-ton is different because we're going to EV, but probably a half-ton wouldn't cost much more than 45 either, would it?
Well,
We did.
we've
we were
been
still doing
fortunate
half-ton.
because of the buying group that we can get in under the province. Quite often a work class vehicle we can get for cheaper than that.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to Department 20, we are continuing to renew our hardtop roads using our own forces and our own select subcontractors. Definitely lots of resurfacing projects planned for this year. And that will be on our operations side, and Rick will have a full list of the proposed projects as part of his work plan when it comes forward in December. With respect to capital projects, there's a number outlined there, and just to recap how we put together a capital project versus a resurfacing project. If the preparation of the road is more than 50% of the cost, then it's a capital project. If it's just a top and a bit of a shoulder dressing and things like that, then it goes in as a resurfacing project. So Rick has outlined Caroline Street, Tyndall Bay, which is a carryover, the 9th line as capital projects for this year. And then of course we have Water Street and we will have to tender that project, which will be possibly a multi-year project. Rick does have microsurfacing back this year. So this is a product that's installed on asphalt surfaces, not tar and chip roads. I believe this is the 4th year of microsurfacing partnership that we would have, and this is typically coordinated by the County of Peterborough, and we would participate in that again in 2022. And we're pleased with the process so far and how that's going. Basically, it ties in, seals the top and ties it in and gets a longer useful life out of our asphalt road.
Yes, ma'am.
Through you to Lane, or maybe Rick. I'm looking at Caroline Street, Rick, and it's got double surface treatment on it. And I've never noticed seeing that before. I just wondered why that. Maybe I just missed it, but
Yeah, that's what, all our roads are double surface treatment, our surface treatment. Like if you take it down to gravel, it's double. If you're just putting on top of a existing, it'll be a single coat. But if you've ever been up on Carolyn Street, it's really gone out of shape. So we just want to clean it up and preserve it. It might be something down the road that they're going to change the water main and stuff in, but we're just trying to get it fixed up for the homeowners in there.
okay, thank you.
This isn't specific to what we're talking about right now, but the work that's being done just south of the public school in Lakefield, where they're, I guess, bringing the lines across from Smith Street. Is that, I know they've done a lot of work, and I guess, what's the timeline for finishing that, I guess, bringing the line across?
Yeah, so because of the work that we had did before when we were tying in Lakefield South and the water tower and tower line or Tower Road, that type of thing, we had the majority of those across the main road of the county. And so unfortunately, to tie in the water main, we had to get back into the road a little bit. That's why there's the area there. But at this point in time, the sewer main to connect Lakefield South is connected. And just this past week, or maybe the end of last week, they tied in the water main as well. So yeah, we're at a point now where they're doing a bit of a what we call punch list and deficiency review on the project. But I would think by the end of well, I think substantial is maybe this week, and we should be able to finish that up. So yeah, that will have a big impact. It will essentially be development ready for Lakefield South.
Donna?
Thank you. Through you to Lane, I'm looking at the Public Works microservice surface project. It's got the list of roads and it's ECR. I assume that's East Communications Road.
That's correct.
Okay.
If I could, Lane, on the sidewalk improvements on the Causeway, so that's part of the infrastructure grant that we participate in. I believe it's what, 83% or 87% covered by the senior officer?
Yeah, I do have a slide coming
Oh,
up to
you do?
speak to
Okay.
that. Yeah, yeah, just a little bit. I just kind of working down through the summary sheet, the CIP program in Ennismore. We have the RFP out now for design. We have interest from at least 3 firms, I think, at this point in time. And so the goal is that we would have that back. We do our final design would be prepared and then tendering in 2022. We had a bit of a scope change there. The suggestion is that in more than just the main intersection there at the cross in Ennismore, we would also extend the sidewalk westerly to Earl Avenue and easterly to the arena on the north side of the road. So a little bit of a scope change there, and we're hoping that we get some good bids back on the RFP that comes back. And
It's due either Monday or Tuesday,
Right.
and then we'll have a report for council at the December 7th meeting.
Donna?
Through you, maybe bypass you, Lane, for a second and go to Angie. I talked to her this morning and had a little bit of a problem with this time frame. We have safety issues with the sidewalks, the one from Earl Avenue to the Four Corners, and the other one going up to the school. We always are having lots of concerns about the children crossing the roads. And I asked her if there's any way that we could, without ruining the design that is being put forward in the RFP, if we could expedite the sidewalks from Earl Avenue up and from the Four Corners up to the school. And she said that all that could be done now would be to ask the engineer, the successful engineer, but I just want to put it on the table that if it was possible, I would like to see the sidewalks expedited before 2023. So it's kind of up in the air as to whether they can do it or not. And I don't know, Angie, how, if it's just enough to say that or.
You could pass a resolution if you wanted to just have that on the public record. But yeah, we can certainly, when we get the successful bidder in place, we can pose that scenario and see whether that design component could be done earlier on in the process, and whether the construction could be done like in advance of the other work at the intersection. Those are all questions we can definitely ask.
I think I would like to make a motion because I've been hearing from people for years about this concern for safety with the children going back and forth from school, especially the local ones that walk. So I don't know if there'd be anybody that would second that, if it's possible to do.
So what your motion is to explore the possibility of including the sidewalks as part of the Innismore Hamlet CIP project.
No, it's already included. If we could expedite it to 2022
So
and
you would
do
want
the
to.
rest of it in 2023.
Okay, well, then that becomes an issue of funding it, right?
That's correct. Yep. So we would have to see if that's possible, and then we'd have to bring back a funding plan to include that in the 2022
So-
budget.
So for two parts, one, to see if it's, that we're able to do it in 2022, and then to come back with a recommendation of how we would fund it if it is feasible.
Correct.
Okay, you're moving it, Vita seconding it. All in favor? Carry.
I've got a comment.
Look, sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess my concern, and I think it's a great idea to get the sidewalk done. However, if the RFPs due on Monday, Tuesday, then we've just changed the scope of that RFP because the cost may go up because they're doing part of it now, and then depending on the road work, they may have to, it may complicate things because the sidewalk's complete. So I'm wondering if we need to go back out to an RFP with that component added of doing the sidewalk first, or because we've changed the scope of work, does that leave us open for somebody to come after us because the tender's not true?
I think the way the motion is worded, it gives the flexibility to look at the ramifications of doing this. And if we run into the kinds of problems that you're alluding to, and I think it's proper to point that out, then that may be a mitigating fact of not being able to do it. So we're not absolutely committing. What we're asking staff is to explore if this is possible, and if it is, what it would cost, and then we would come back to approve it. But you're right, if we go by and somebody says, well, it's a whole new ball game, and if there's all kinds of additional costs, well, then it'll be back in council's lap to decide if that's what we want to do. But I think it's a point well taken about what we would see. But I think Donna's point is just, let's take a look at it and see what's possible. And as you point out, Jerry, it may not be possible. Okay, did I call that vote? No, I didn't. All in favor? Oh, I did? Okay, good, thank you. Okay, move on.
Thank you, through you. I just wanted to mention to Rick that I appreciate that you have done some paving to mitigate the state of the road while we wait for the answers on this. It was really getting in really bad shape, so thank you.
Rob always having my back, making sure people can hear what I'm saying. So sorry about that. So we're just talking about the stamped concrete. So really this slide is really just taking a look at using an outside contractor to install stamped concrete and replace the interlock in the downtown
Okay,
core.
Anita and then Donna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really happy to see this happening because I've had quite a few comments or complaints about the state of, like the picture on the left, as well as weeds that grow along Sunshine Sidewalk and the building there. So hopefully it'll, clean up the downtown core. So it's going to look nice.
I just wanted to comment on stamped concrete versus interlocking. I think it's a little bit more expensive, I believe, but I think it's worth it. Interlocking, it's a nightmare just at my own house. I'm always picking weeds out. So I think it's a great idea.
Sherry?
Thank you, through you. In view of the fact we're spending money in that area for Trail Town for improvements, it only makes sense to do this too. So thank you.
Okay, and we actually can now get to the mayor's question in terms of the causeway. Definitely, yeah. As the mayor's pointed out, this is a multi-million-dollar project that the county teamed up with the township on. It's really a county as the primary applicant. The project also includes Yankee Line, and so I think it's in excess of $5 million overall, with a almost 90% funded by the federal government and the provincial government together. The county has a share, of course. Now our share is really relatively small in the grand scheme of things. It's about $170,000 overall, $100,000 for the multi-use path component, which BTE was before council a few meetings ago to outline the approach that we'll be taking along there. And then about $70,000 for some lighting along that section as well. So we've put in the capital budget for this year our contribution that would go into the project. If some of it is delayed, then we won't have to pay that out. But basically, the county and their engineering team is coordinating that project.
Just a question on that, because one of the issues when the original discussion had taken place some years ago, it was street lighting and a sidewalk. That changed to a multi-use trail. And the question then was, there was no question that if it was a sidewalk, it was all our responsibility, but a multi-use trail, the question was, is a portion of it a multi-use trail the county's responsibility? Because that's different from a sidewalk. And I was wondering if those discussions ever landed in.
Yeah, so I would say that we have not yet had the final discussions on that, especially I would say we have talking operationally and with the engineering crew. The finance folks haven't talked about that, but we are proposing to put our full share in. I guess ongoing discussions we would have to have is maintenance. I do know that when BTE approached council, they suggested that maybe it would only be a fair weather multi-use trail, those types of things. So yeah, we're treating it because of the investment in the area, because of the significance of the causeway, not only to the county, but to our township as well. We're looking at that as just our contribution to a multi-million-dollar project.
So we're getting there approximately for every dollar we put in, we get 9 from the senior levels. Yeah.
That's correct.
Donna.
Yes, through you to Lane. I never have been clear about how far the streetlights are going to be extended. Will they just be at the bridge portion or will they be all along?
No, what is providing so that it would meet the criteria of an illumination survey, and it would be across the whole causeway. So there may be more at each end just based on the requirements of traffic and things like that, but there would be enough illumination across the causeway for pedestrian travel.
And I know this isn't really, well, could be a budget question, but it's not addressed here. But I just wondered about the possibility of plowing that in the winter. I know it was said it wouldn't be plowed, but we do have that little sidewalk plow in Bridge North, do we not? Could we not use that to, and it might not need, the way our winters are now, we might not have to do it too often.
Yeah, so that's definitely, I guess the best way to describe that would be a service level improvement. So the budgets that we typically provide, they maintain service level or maintain other legislative requirements. And I think given the causeway and where that is, the other issue isn't so much even snow removal, but it's slip and fall for ice and things like that. So pretty much I think actually every sidewalk that we take care of, we have to sand as well.
Okay.
And so it's not to say that that couldn't be something that council could consider at some point in time, but I think we would get that in place and then figure out the cost to do that.
And we likely couldn't put salt because it's so close to the water, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that in terms of saltwater management, because definitely, or salt management close to the water, because definitely the causeway itself receives salt application
Okay.
and the county goes across.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, there was just one last, I didn't have a separate slide for it, but there's an additional sidewalk project just along Concession Street. So that would actually close out the Concession Street sidewalk. We're trying to coordinate that with the local commercial site plan improvement at Cottage Toys. So when that project moves ahead, I know Rob and Rick have been in discussions. Engineering firm that's involved with Cottage Toys is Engage Engineering, who we have a good relationship with. And we're going to try to get that coordinated so that when the site works are done, we also get the sidewalk and the bit of asphalt to get out to Concession Street done at the same time. And
Thank you, through you. I think the walls are starting to go up already at Cottage Toys. So the project's moving along very well. And I think this is one project where we should have some kind of a celebration when it's done.
Okay. Anita.
I second that, Sherry. It's going to be great.
Okay, off to the roads.
yeah, so we're over to our fleet now. We do have a tandem up for replacement in our Public Works Department this year. It's 11.7, which is up for replacement. We do expect delivery issues to arise this year. We're moving ahead with the tender approach. The question will be whether we continue with our same approach where we tender the chassis first and then the plow and body separately, or whether we actually put it all together. And what we're experiencing is no different than any other municipality. That the chips that go in these trucks are causing a delivery delay. Same thing that is affecting the general commercial market for General Motors and Ford. So We do have it in the budget for this year because that's what the replacement schedule calls for. The truck is definitely in need of replacement, but we do note that we may have some delivery issues, and so Rick may need to come back at some point in time to alter the typical process for us ordering that truck. And we do have a mower. The mower was a carryover from last year. It continues to move along and do the job that's required of it. We had considered keeping it off of the replacement schedule, but by putting it on there, if the unit breaks down, then we're able to move ahead expeditiously and replace it. And definitely at the right time of the year, we need that mower going for sure. So if we can defer it again, we will, but it's on the replacement schedule for this year. So there was a little bit, another sheet there on lighting improvements that was just on the Causeway. So we've already touched on that. Moving on to Parks and Rec. Primarily two areas in Parks and Rec itself. The campground, of course, we are proceeding with our discussions with Orca at this point in time and trying to negotiate an agreement for Orca to take over operation of the campground. But in preparation of that, we do know that there will be some changes required for infrastructure. So this doesn't propose the full change to the campground, but what it does do is put in a dollar value there so that we can get some engineering work done and some studies and take a look at what would be proposed for the 2023 year. The other area is with respect to the marina, and you'll see later on that we are talking about a marina expansion study, but as pointed out in the budget, and there's a photo there as well, there are a couple areas that we need to take care of. It's back in 2000, 2001, I think, that the marina was fully upgraded. And we're running into similar situations with our interlock there, whether it's either heaving or sinking a little bit. And then we do have some of our boards in the area that, while we do replace stock boards and things like that, there are some that maybe need a little bit more of a wholesale change as well. So Mike's put together a budget there at about $15,000. We're trying to keep those costs minimal at the same time, kind of having a risk management approach to what we need to do at that facility. Hopefully being able to minimize the costs until we get the full costing done on a expansion study.
Okay.
Over to, and that was that's a close-up of that photo that I was talking about at the marina. Sorry about that. Over to the arenas. Compressor overhauls are proposed for both arenas of two different compressors, one at each facility, to extend the useful life of those facilities. And that comes in around $10,000 or $12,000, maybe $20,000 altogether. Probably, I think one is smaller than the other, so 8 and 12. And then at the Lakefield Smith Community Center, both of the AC units up at the pin room need to be replaced there as well. And those are replacements through the overhauls or through the UMP fund, and then the HVAC units, because they're part of the facility, is through the facility reserve.
Okay.
Over to library services. Of course, there's a continued emphasis on technology and space improvements. There are a few investments. This has already went to the library board and it's been approved in terms of capital investments. A new area is the makerspace, and Sarah and Megan put together an excellent package there. So the Trillium Foundation has approved the makerspace funding. This is a photo of the space as it exists today. So they've reviewed all the requirements of the space. They've removed old carpeting, put in laminate flooring, paint job, things like that. And Sarah's now in the works to putting into the works replacement of some additional pieces in the building, and then actually putting in place the technology that's going to be in the makerspace. So that's outlined in the budget, and that will also then have an impact on operations, where we'll see some new programming opportunities open up, and then also some right within the hamlet, within the village itself, some community tech that will be available there so that they don't have to go too far to do things like vinyl cutter machines, 3D printers and things like that as well. So that's an exciting project. Should be coming online at some point in 2022.
Sherry?
Thank you, through you. The upstairs of that building could use some work too. Are we looking at doing anything there anytime soon?
Nothing proposed right now. We do obviously have a study that's on the books for the expansion of the library itself. And so that space was looked at as library space and community space as a combination. The challenge always for community space is that once it gets entrenched, it's hard to move a community group along. So what was looked at there in that model was that there would be supporting library and community space. So that it wouldn't be a kind of home to a community organization, but it would be something that the library could team up with and provide library services with the help of a community organization. As we were talking about with Lakefield South coming on board, we would anticipate that as the population increases in Lakefield South, then all of a sudden that will bring up the population overall. We'll have to take a look at that expansion at that point in time. So I think the makerspace will start to, kind of make use of that space in a more effective way for library service, and then we'll start to take a look at access and things like that for the second floor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's kind of the department by department review. This is just a bit of a summary, and then I have some more information on studies. So you can see in this pie chart, the largest investments by far are in roads and fleet, with facilities and overall technology taking kind of third place, if you will. So continuing to invest heavily in our infrastructure. As we have presented today, it's a little over 1.99 million to council, keeping in mind that that does not include the CIP work in Ennismore or the Water Street project, which will be a multi-million-dollar project as well. So significant investments, but overall the capital investments in 2022 will be quite a bit more than the $2 million we've outlined today. A bit on studies. I know from a corporate services, financial services perspective, the asset management plan will consume a large chunk of time in the first 6 months of 2022. Significant focus and effort will be put in there. We have our policy already approved. We'll be looking at the final policy when we bring the plan forward. Stormwater project is ongoing. We've had some operational delays there with our contractor, and I was hoping that that aspect of the project would be done. We do have our asset management software and implementation phase right now, so it's part of our GIS program that we use here locally. And overall, when we bring the study forward, we want to ensure coordination of roads, water, sewer, and storm water when we make decisions on capital investments. So the province had delayed the actual requirement to have that in, and so our asset management rewrite is now delayed to it was delayed in 2021, but it will be in effect in 2022. A component of that is the requirement that the roads need study would be updated. We can only be, when we bring a new plan in place, all of our data needs to be within 2 years of being fresh. So our roads need studies 2017. We have kept it up to date, but we need to turn that over to the engineering firm just to update that and bring a new study in for 2022. There is a new requirement which is outlined in there with respect to our storm sewer. And so we've put some money in the budget for that in terms of getting all of our storm water works in the township consolidated into one ECA. It's a new requirement that the Ministry of the Environment is bringing into effect. We're in fairly good shape there because we had all of our stormwater ponds reviewed a number of years ago for maintenance requirements. And with the project I just outlined with our linear infrastructure for stormwater, we should have that completed at some point in the spring. So all of this pulled together will allow us to make application to the province, and that will make our process moving moving ahead, it'll make it a lot smoother. And of course, the other study area is the library marina expansion program. Taking a look at what we have there now, we know that we have waiting lists on an annual basis at the marina. Taking a look at some of our other possible areas for dockage in and around the area. And that's been in the works for a while. It is in our development charges study. So that's proposed that that would be funded through development charges, the recreation component. So just a little bit just on grants, because we typically bring that up this time. Our provincial grants, the UMF program was confirmed, as mentioned at the last council meeting. So that is a significant unconditional grant for us, a little over $1 million. We only had a decrease of $100 over last year. The OCF grant has been confirmed. We don't exactly know our dollar value at this point in time, but the province has completed the review of that program. They have outlined that it will double over the next 5 years, I believe, and that any amounts on an annual basis would be, if it's a decrease, it would be capped at a 15% decrease. So I just use that number to look at a possible increase as well. So our number in the last little while has been in the 180 range, so it could be as high as $220,000. That's another source of stable infrastructure funding, and as soon as we get our asset management plan into effect and ensure that we have a financial strategy there, then some of those funds on an annual basis should be available for investments in our infrastructure as well. And on federal grant side, has always been referred to as the AMO federal gas tax. It's actually been rebranded recently as the Canada Community Building Fund. Our dollar value for this year is $541,000. As I understand, it's still being administered by AMO. It's just a different branding in terms of the name. It has expanded eligibility over the last number of years in terms of other projects. It's proposed that we would, because of our infrastructure deficit on roads, it's proposed that we would continue to use it just as our roads reconstruction fund. But as the asset management plan rolls out, and as we see the other departments come online, facilities, some of these other areas, then there could be the potential there that there could be some other investments from that fund as well. But what's proposed this year is that we would use those funds in roads resurfacing, and the Water Street project. So that actually is the end of the presentation. There is a report that's provided for council, but the recommendation essentially from that report is on the screen. Can't recall if at the very start, I thank the management team for putting things together, Angie and Janice for sure, and of course our thoughts are with Janice today. And I know she'd like to be here today, but we'll see Janice soon, and turn it over to council now.
Jerry, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to, regarding the Humane Society, I think that is absolutely excellent.
We're going to deal with that as a second report, Jerry.
Oh, are we? All right. Yeah, I'll move the budget then.
Okay, so you want to move the recommendations? Jerry, seconded by Anita. All those in favor?
All right.
Carry. Okay, so that deals with that. So we have a second report though on the Humane Society, and did you want to speak to that?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. The Humane Society has been before council a couple of times with respect to their new animal care center that's going in, and their fundraising program, Our Pet Project. There have been regular updates as the new facility is underway down in Technology Drive in Peterborough. I guess they had made a formal request to the county. It came back to our township, and at the July 13th meeting, it was proposed that it would come to the budget process for discussion. I can say, and I've said this to the head of the Humane Society, that when capital requests come forward from the community with a former financial person as their CAO and me in this chair for 30-some years, the typical answer is no. We can't provide that because we have a number of other programs that we need to provide here as a municipality. The difference that we saw in this one is that the Municipal Act does provide the authority for the lower tier to regulate animals. and that we do have an animal control bylaw in place and the requirement that we have some agreement with the pound. So this is a requirement that the lower tier actually provides this service. Similar to other municipal operations, if we were looking at a municipal sense, we, as you see, we're investing in capital upgrades to ensure that things carry on. And so we look at the animal care center as an investment that allows the pound service to continue and the service provider to continue to provide service to us so that they can do their job. I did have in-depth discussions with Sean Morey, who is the executive director there, to request a little bit more detail about their ask. They had asked for $50,000. Wanted to confirm that that level of community support would be prominently displayed, and he has assured me that that is the case. And also, with respect to the project itself, there are quite a few architect renderings, and you know, as is typical, some of those renderings are a little splashier than the end result. But I think I could say I generally agree with Sean that you know, while it is an animal care facility, it shouldn't just be a warehouse and a nondescript building someplace. So it can contribute to the fabric in the community, social fabric. There are a number of key architectural features that contribute to the actual building purpose. And so when you look at it, some of the larger windows, the overhangs, things like that, they may be looked at as architectural features, but in fact, they provide natural light. The architect's been very key in situating the building on the site so that they take advantage of all those features, much the same that we did in Bridge North when we put the Bridge North Library in place. Definitely a larger building because they have larger capacity. The HVAC system itself, it kind of emphasizes the health and disease prevention that's in at the site. The HVAC system, a little over $1.4 million in terms of investment. And the air exchanges are phenomenal. There's something like 15 air exchanges per hour in the animal spaces and 8 per hour in the human spaces. So definitely a high priority on health and disease prevention. And definitely bigger spaces for dogs in particular. And there is in-out privileges, if you will, for the dogs on an ongoing basis. So those are some of the answers that Sean had provided. If the fundraising goal is surpassed, then there are a couple of areas that they had to take off of their project. One is an off-leash area, and the other was a rehabilitative trail, and they have been deferred at this point in time. But if the fundraising goal is surpassed, then they may bring that back on the table. And of course, I know it's near and dear to my heart. As soon as you start to build something, you need to set aside reserve money because you know you're going to have to repair it or replace it down the road. So Sean had noted that as well. So that's why this request is being treated a little bit differently from a staff perspective. And we're suggesting that we would support the capital's request because they're a service provider, and they can then continue to provide the appropriate animal control services, including shelter services. Just before council for deliberation today.
Jerry, you had a comment you want to make on it?
Yeah, please. Thank you. I think this is the most worthwhile cause that's come before us in a long time. This, as Lane had mentioned, this thing is state of the art. I've seen the drawings. I've met with them at my house. I'm a big supporter of it. You know, one thing Lane didn't mention was there's therapy pools for dogs in there. I mean, this thing is the creme de la creme. The other important thing on this is one time. That's this donation. It's not like hospice or the Canoe Museum, where every year they're coming with their cap in the hand because they've got an unsustainable model. The money generated from the spay and neuter program helps cover their costs. The OSPCA is involved. All these costs are covered. They're self-sufficient and profit making to put that money back in. So I'd like to move this, and similar to Lane being near and dear with reserves, this is near and dear to me. And they've been turned down numerous times from different levels of government, and I think it would be excellent if we stepped up to the plate.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Herron. Do we have a second?
I have another comment.
Well, I'll get a seconder first and then. we'll
Okay.
comment. So Sherry's going to second it, and then Donna, you have a comment.
Yes, through you to Lane. Did they approach the county for money? I know that's a little bit different animal. They may strange word. Because the county wouldn't hire them for services, so probably they didn't.
That's correct. So they did approach the county, and because it isn't a mandate of the county, they suggested that they would approach the lower tier municipalities.
And do you know if there are other municipalities that use the Humane Society?
In the county, there are for sure, and the city definitely does. The city support is over $1 million that they're providing to the program. And I think that at this point, Sean had went back with, in that summer period to all the municipalities. Janice, I know, has had discussions with the different CAOs and kind of outlined it as a statutory requirement for animal shelters that we were looking at taking forward a recommendation. So I just don't know at this point what the other lower tiers are doing.
Well, I guess it isn't really our concern if other municipalities are supporting it. If we have enough rationale to feel that's the right thing to do, then it is, I guess.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, through you. So can you please confirm where the money will be coming from, Lane?
Yes. So for the contribution that we're putting forward, it would come from the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. So that is our unconditional provincial grant.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carried. Okay, I believe that completes our agenda for today. You'll need the confirming bylaw. By Sherry, second by Anita. All in favor? And Jerry moves adjournment, seconded by Donna. All in favor? Thank you to staff, all of you, those of you who are here, those of you who are here virtually, for all of the work that was put into developing the capital plan. Thank you. And we look forward to the next installment of the budget. What's the date? December the
9th.
December the 9th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to add to Lane, that was so easy to follow and so well documented as usual. Thank you.
Can I have confirmation on the date? Is it January the 17th through the 18th for the one after?
I think it's the 27th. I think.
On your slide, it's the 17th.
I think that's when the preliminary year end will be done.